All right, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating today. This session is a briefing. It's also kind of our kickoff to the PY 2020 monitoring cycle. As mentioned, this is John Barr with the Office of Employment Training with Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. I'm responsible for oversight of monitoring and planning activities, amongst other activities. Today, I'm joined on the webinar with regional managers Annie Dorr and Brian Ellis, along with some of our senior monitors, Ron Johnson, others who have worked over the last 3 weeks with our OET monitoring team to get ready for this next monitoring cycle. So we are finalizing kind of our preparations, and I know some of you are aware that we've actually already started some of the process, some of the desk work for set of monitoring reviews. First 3 local areas. Our initial work is underway. So today is really intended to be an overview of the process. This is the 3rd or 4th year that we have provided this. And again, the intent is to provide you with just an overview of our approach for monitoring for this year, to identify areas of concern from last year and give you a heads up regarding areas of emphasis for this current cycle, and then give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. So let's, hopefully you are all seeing the screen here. I'll talk about the agenda as mentioned. First, want to just point out that we have a number of new team members with the OET that I'm very excited about. We're going to talk about the program year 2019 common findings. We're going to talk about some of our monitoring procedures for 2020. We're going to give you a high-level overview of the monitoring schedule. As I mentioned, kind of those areas of emphasis for the next year will also be discussed. So new OET staff, as I mentioned, very happy to have a new group of staff that have come on board over the last 6 to 9 months. And some of these names you'll note are familiar. Christy Houston, Levi Bierup. They've been promoted into new roles as monitors, as well as Carmine Burns, Marvin Anderson, Trevor Lawson, Kristen Norvell, Robin Krauman, Chelsea Qualls, and Elizabeth Shoes. You may recognize Robin Krauman, who also a member of WIOA staff and worked in a number of different WIOAs, and so very happy to have her and the rest of the team members on board. So these folks will be plugged into the monitoring reviews for this year. They come in at different levels and will be assigned to different components of the review. I do want to note that as you look at your monitoring announcement letters, you'll note that a number of, you'll have all of the staff that are assigned to the monitoring review, and you may note that it will be much larger than in previous years, and that's to provide the staff with experience in reviewing some of the different monitoring components. We will have experienced monitors as on the team, and certainly as the lead monitor, but our plan is to have a well-balanced team of staff for the reviews. And then also Annie Dorr and Brian Ellis will be involved with the reviews and along with myself as we kind of progress through the cycle, we'll be engaged as needed. All right, so I want to move to the next section, which is just on the program year 2019 common findings. And we'll start with the U.S. Department of Labor. So USDOL conducted several monitoring reviews in PY19, including National Dislocated Worker Grants, Youth Program Review, and also a governance review. So this slide provides just a high-level overview of the most common findings and areas of concern. And you'll note that these are fairly similar to those common findings from PY18. There continues to be an emphasis around the documentation of an individual employment plan or individual service strategy, for youth, obviously. Concern is specifically that the services that are being provided to a participant, don't necessarily match up with what is in the IEP. There is just a continued emphasis on keeping this IEP or ISS as a kind of a living document, as they've mentioned to us. Something that gets updated and communicated between the case manager and the client as a blueprint or a plan for their services and ultimately where that participant wants to be as far as employment and education goals. Participant assessment and enrollment determinations. This was specific in that there wasn't in several instances there were cases where there wasn't enough documentation in the form of a case note or in the form of other documentation that that showed how a case manager made the ultimate decision to enroll a participant into services. So the thought process is that providing an individual training account and authorizing, those funds for training or a supportive service, that's an investment of taxpayer dollars. And the DOL monitors had concerns in that although a form may be, completed, there wasn't enough, or it would have been better if a case manager would have connected the dots to indicate that because of the case manager's assessment of the individual, that and because of the individual's employment or educational goals, that this service, be it a career service or a training service or what have you, is appropriate, and the expenditure of those funds is appropriate based on these factors. So we understand that that's a higher level of expectation than is certainly out there in kind of clear policy. But we just raise this again as a continued area of emphasis from USDOL, and something that we will be looking at as far as making those assessments. And when we talk about assessments, we're talking about big picture assessments, not only just the reading and the formalized reading and math assessments. Participant exits and referrals, obviously with an increased requirement for dislocated workers, always had the requirement for adults, ensuring that follow-up service are offered for those 12 months. And then finally on the list is the issue around the one-stop operator payments. And this is a very technical governance issue that many of you at the local level are aware that the state has been working through over the last 2 years. I think starting with LWIA 15 and then moving to LWIA 21, there were multiple USDOL reviews that noted some findings and concerns regarding the payment of one-stop operator costs. To respond to this, DCEO worked with our interagency partners and developed some initial responses that were not accepted. We then determined that it was appropriate to request a waiver of the technical requirement regarding a transfer of funds between the entities, between the board and the one-stop operator, given the fact that the services were indeed provided and could be documented. So we did ask for a formal waiver of that. The waiver request was not approved in the state's 2020 plan submission. However, it was not denied either. I think the language was a waiver was not necessary. So we are meeting within the next 2 weeks with DOL to go over kind of our latest attempt to satisfy this requirement. So that's kind of an overview of the federal common findings. Another point to make is that, as in our previous year, we will attempt to coordinate any federal monitoring reviews with the state monitoring reviews. So, based on our calendar, if we have any, say or any, recommendation for an area that may be selected, we will try to, take a look at the calendar where we're at in the cycle, so we can coordinate that review at the state and the federal level. That way, you won't get hit, twice, once from the state, once at the federal level. But recognize that we can't always make those logistics work out. Okay, I want to move now to the common findings at the state level. So from Department of Commerce, top findings include just that continued connection, two-way communication. And, in many cases, this is related to participants that have completed a training and, are, still working to find employment. Next item, the IEP or ISS isn't updated. Same kind of issue as we noted from the USDOL list. Some issues around just data entry and recording of test scores, not matching hard copies, services not being recorded within 10 days of the activity, and then eligibility documentation. We always have a couple of issues just around source documentation not being available at the time of the file review, but I think I'm happy to report that I don't believe there were any disallowed costs associated with that last year, in that, as part of the monitoring follow-up, we were able to identify, supporting documents or other documents that supported the participant eligibility, and it was just more of a IWDS recording issue that we had to address at the end of the day. Here's a slide that just provides just, an overview of all the findings. Want to shout out to Brian Tippy one of our Springfield monitors, for working with part of our team members to compile this information from our last year's monitoring letters. You'll note, again, many of those issues that were included on the DCEO findings, as well as the USDOL findings, are listed here, but you can just see the actual numbers are listed here as far as number of findings and the number of LWIAs where the issue was identified. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and take a pause to see if there are any questions. I do see one in the chat pod from Dana, and one of the so the question is on participant assessment. So as we all know, or I shouldn't assume we all know, but assessments come in many different ways, or there's many different ways to assess a participant, right? There's a formalized kind of scholarly assessment of an individual or participant's math and reading skills, and those tests, we know there's a lot of considerations around those formalized testings. From DOL's perspective, to relay the conversations within those monitorings, when they see assessment, they consider that from the point that you first meet with a participant or a customer. So it's a matter of assessing what their employment and education goals are. It's assessing their interests and skills and knowledge and abilities, and determining whether or not, and this is really a key, so I'm glad you asked the question, the underlying term that was mentioned is suitability, right? So we want to ensure that the service that is being provided is suitable for the individual's specific, whether it's a training service or whether it's a career service, to make sure that it's suitable and appropriate for that individual. One thing that is, again, sitting in those monitoring reviews, one thing that does come to mind is that under our trade program, there is a standard email that is required, that talks about the 6 conditions of training. So it kind of goes through just a checklist of considerations to ensure that talks about individuals' knowledge, skills, abilities, and it's connected to their career and education goals. It talks about that the individual's physical and mental capabilities match with the occupation that they are pursuing. It talks about that the training is reasonable, right? So like the training logistics are reasonable, in that if the individual is working a part-time job, that that there still is enough time to both do that work as well as enter training, and that the training isn't located 100 miles away. So those are all of it's the logistics, right? So bottom line there is, does it make sense? Would a reasonable person conclude that enrolling someone into a service that is going to commit the local area to fund that service, does it make sense? All right. So other items: explain what service records are not recorded. So service records not recorded. So when you provide a service to an individual or participant, that service should be recorded in IWDS within 10 days. Yes, and thank you, Rory, for that comment as far as the 6 criteria for training. Yes, and it also includes the cost reasonableness and assurance the participants' ability to sustain themselves financially during the training. Awesome. That's exactly it. So our thought there is, don't recreate the wheel with this. If you want to utilize or customize that, and that's the key, right? So it shouldn't be just a, it's just kind of copy and paste, but as far as like a template to suggest the case managers to utilize, you may consider that. The key is obviously make sure that template is customized for that participant. It should always be customized to those individual, needs and circumstances. As far as common fiscal monitoring findings, we will have some additional information that we can share. Quite honestly, there weren't terribly many fiscal findings, and that is absolutely a credit to you as local areas and grantees in performing your fiscal and administrative duties. I'm trying to think if there were any disallowed costs. I believe there were some question costs last year, and certainly our hope is to always avoid questioned and certainly disallowed costs, but it certainly can happen. But I would say that part of those most frequent fiscal findings, including cash on hand, included some other reporting issues in GRS as far as obligations not matching. But again, more on the documentation side, and again, good news, right, for the field that we don't see a lot of issues around that core eligibility and issues around major areas of concern around the administrative and fiscal management of the local area. Certainly as it relates to the uniform administrative requirements. Okay. Any other questions? And you can put them in the chat, and I think we can unmute you as well, or you can unmute yourself if you have a question. Okay.
John, this is LaDonna from Area 11.
Hi, LaDonna.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah, I hear you, yeah.
I don't know if you're going to cover it later or if it's just now open. How is monitoring going to be performed with COVID?
Yeah, we're going to cover that later in the
Okay.
slide. So hold tight on that one. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and unless there was another question out there just about last year's findings, we'll continue on then. All right, so okay. So we're going to talk now about just the 2020 monitoring approach, and this includes our both our approach as well as the different components of the review. As in previous year, we will review fiscal, administrative, programmatic, governance, and also non-formula. So we know that there are a number of new grants that are out there, new dislocated worker grants. We've got the new COVID layoff aversion. We've got some apprenticeship expansion and also some WIOA statewide activity service integration grants. As with previous monitoring cycle, the department's monitoring overall context is grounded in the idea or in the principles of continuous improvement. We're going to continue to move forward, using our reviews, kind of using a multifaceted risk assessment that will include the factors that are listed here on the screen. And that includes the GATA pre-qualification, so the internal control questionnaire and the program risk assessments that you complete on an annual basis. We'll be looking at your previous monitoring reports from certainly last year and years previous. We'll be looking at a number of system reports from IWDS and other systems, including the incumbent worker tracking system. We'll be looking at the results of our OET subject matter expert reviews. And an example of that is, we have staff that review the requirements of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, right? So, for instance, we know that Beverly Miller with the OET staff, she helps us and coordinate some of the local workforce board composition requirements. So Beverly, along with Laura Dom and others with staff who kind of been pitching in to help ensure that that composition is compliant. Those reviews are already complete, but in some cases there are areas of concern which can raise to the level of a finding within a monitoring if the areas haven't been able to complete the requirements. Again, it's not a gotcha situation here. It's a matter of if this is something that we've been working with you to try to get resolved and it just isn't resolved, we are required, obligated to indicate that in the letter as it relates to, at the time of the review, this isn't in compliance. And so instead of having our monitoring team review things that have already been done, we have a way internally of checking a number of the WIOA requirements, and so that's what that bullet point refers to. So again, it includes anything from board composition, one-stop operator agreements, MOUs, local regional plans, those types of requirements. We'll also look, certainly, as it relates to risk management, we'll look at the composition of the local workforce area. What is your size? What is your budget? How many participants are you serving? How many subrecipients and workforce partners do you have? What is your overall risk? Will drive a lot of how we build our monitoring samples and the level of activity that we will get into as part of the monitoring review. I think, LaDonna, to your question specifically, for the Program 2020 monitoring cycle, it is anticipated that DCEO will conduct the majority of our monitoring remotely, and that is, obviously subject to change. We certainly, for the first series of events, that is our plan, and as I mentioned, we're actually moving forward with the first 3 events. WIA staff will be requested to provide information electronically through secure file transfers, and also will be requested to upload a sample of the participant files into IWDS, again, just based on the sample size, based on that risk assessment of the local area. We recognize that in some cases those files can be lengthy. We definitely want to work with you as far as providing time to upload and time to review and compile all of those documents. And so we're working with our monitoring teams, with our leads to ensure that you have, that time to make those uploads. I should also note that just as it relates to the process, this process with the IWDS uploads has been used, I think, for quite a while. With the administration of the trade program, and we will be able to provide additional resources for areas that need assistance with this, and we can also, if needed, we can schedule a training to assist in the upload of documents to IWDS. I should note that these procedures were used, starting in March. We actually had approximately half of our monitoring schedule that was open, right? Was either in progress or had not initiated, starting back in March, and we've worked, with many local areas in completing these reviews. So I want to thank you for your assistance in developing our what I would call our remote monitoring procedures. I want to also thank Robin Krallman with our office. She really took the lead in developing these and solidifying how this actually gets done. So very much a work in progress, but I would say that we have some solid footings to ground ourselves as we move forward with the 2020 cycle. All right, I'm going to pause there to see if there are any questions. And we could go ahead, Kirsten, and unmute those. If you want to unmute and ask a question, please feel free to do that.
There are a couple questions in the chat, John.
Okay, let's see. So Mike, right. That's great. Yes, Mike. Thank you, Mike Pierman down LWIA 14. Just noting the assessment process that the IEP is definitely a living document. Should be reviewed every 30 days and expected to be included. So the question is this expected to be included in case notes every month? So at this point, this is an open question. I think I saw Laura Dom on the line, and Laura, if you want to comment, or I can put a pin in that question. I think that we are reviewing, some potential changes in case management policy. Laura, I don't know if you want to respond further.
Hi, John, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. That was also addressed in the career planning policy, which has been submitted to the Illinois Workforce Partnership for review and feedback. So if you would like to comment on that, now would be a good time to put any information in there. I'm assuming that what you're saying is that it's definitely a best practice. It should be reviewed, and we are assuming that most of the career planners out there are doing this. So to document it in case notes would be a best practice, and should definitely be noted.
Okay. Great. And so again, if you have comments and thoughts on that, definitely encourage you to connect with Michelle and is it Lisa as well over in LWIA 3, I believe. Okay. Kathy, so the virtual process worked for us. Great communication. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. And I'll say that is one of the things that we are hoping to accomplish, through this process, and understanding that, communication really is the key. And so while, we do have a, somewhat, tight, schedule as it relates to just making everything fit, as we have a lot of balls that are up in the air, and we recognize that you're the same way. And so, we're trying to, make accommodations where we can. But, let us know, let the lead monitor know if there are issues and concern. We'll try to work with you, try to come up with a solution, and get through this, unusual time. Okay, what service integration documents will be required? We will probably take a look at the, so those I think you're referring to the review of those non-formula grants, right? So if your local workforce area received a WIOA statewide activities grants, right? It was, I think primarily focused around service integration and maybe some other planning activities. What we will be looking at is a review of the scope of work, kind of the plan versus actual. We don't anticipate that there'll be a ton of expenditures. There may be, but I believe that there aren't any individuals that are directly served. So there's no like participant training dollars, if I remember correctly, in most of those grants. If there are, and if there are any participants that are served, we'll probably take a look at at least a couple of those. But by and large, it's a review of where you're at as far as your plan versus actual activities, and we understand that we'll be flexible as far as kind of where things at if things have been delayed due to COVID. Let's see. So when documents are uploaded, should this be done as one or two files, or each individual document scanned and uploaded? Generally speaking, and Robin Krallman, if you're on, I know you are our technical expert in this area. So if you're on and able to field that question, I'd like to defer that one to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I couldn't find my unmute button. Good morning, everybody. For uploads, it's however is the most convenient for you all, whatever is going to work. Some have really nice scanners that can go through those papers very, very quickly. So however it works out best, some folks have uploaded one file only, and it can be anywhere from 30 to 100 pages and all in one file. And we will look at however is best for you. Other people maybe will upload the eligibility documentation, and then they may do some of those, maybe attendance forms or something on a separate upload. So whatever's the most convenient and works for you, we can work around however you upload it. As long as we can view it, we're good with however it works for you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay, and yes, and thank you, Michelle Cerruti, for adding that note regarding the IWP Performance Task Force reviewing the draft, and again, emphasizing that it is a draft career planning policy. And just any comments can go to Karen Allen, and she'll be able to incorporate those. Those are due on at the end of the week, right? September 25th. And LaDonna, thank you for that question regarding the 1E layoff aversion for employers. What monitoring documents will be required? So we will be reviewing a sample of those to verify that any payments that have been made are substantiated with that you have invoices to support of payments, and we are working to finalize those kind of grants, what we call grant specific questions, and if any concerns on that, you definitely can connect back with us. Okay. Any other questions on kind of our monitoring approach? I want to now, and hopefully, I'm gonna move to the monitoring schedule, and start with the slide. Okay, so hopefully you're all seeing the monitoring schedule slide, and just again highlighting some of the basics that all local workforce areas must be monitored. And that have to be monitored annually, I should note, and that's an important distinction. All non-formula grants are to be monitored at least once during the life of the grant. Mentioning again that additional time will be provided for the expanding the monitoring samples if that's the case, and also the electronic upload of the monitoring sample. And then obviously, again, the schedule is subject to change based on the COVID developments. So I'm going to stop the share here and give everybody a preview. We'll send out a list with this slide deck of the monitoring schedule. But I want to just run through the calendar quickly. So you might want to grab a pen so you know kind of what month your area is on tap for. So those that are right in October, you should have already been notified by our monitoring team lead, and that includes WIOA 2, 5, and 19. Then moving into November, we're looking at WIOA 10 and 26. December, we're looking for WIOA 6 and 20. January, we're looking for WIOA 14 and 22. February, we're looking at WIOA 3 and 21. March, we're looking at WIOA 13 and 17. April, we're looking at WIOA 7 and WIOA 15. May, we're looking at WIOA 11 and WIOA 23. June is a busy month. June is a double. It's really July, but June is WIOA 1 and WIOA 25. Really, it's June / more July. We're looking to wrap up with WIOA 4, 18, and 24. So we'll have a listing of these. Again, these are still tentative. We're going to lock these down hopefully in the next within the next week to 10 days. And as I said, we'll work with you to a certain, to the extent that we're able to, as far as the timing of these. But kind of once the train has left the station, it's going to be difficult for us to, let's switch out this area for that area. So, and again, we know that in some instances, key members of your team may not be available during a certain week or the week that it started. I would point out that we do have, some flexibility around, when some of the monitoring components are reviewed. Typically our reviews are, it takes a month, right? So we're doing about a week to 2 weeks of prep work, when in a traditional world, we were in the field on site. That was really a matter of 3 to 5 days. And then we've got about a week and a half of worth of compiling the information and wrapping things up. So that is our typical review. And, you know, for larger LWIAs or LWIAs with a higher degree of risk, those timelines, you know, could extend and others shrink. So just to give you an idea of the overall timeline and schedule. Okay, so I'm gonna.
Hey, John, this is Julie Courtney. Can I ask a question?
You sure can.
When people are on site, if they had a question on a file, it was very easy for them to come find us and we could show them where the information was, et cetera. Being virtual, are we going to have that same type of communication, or are we just expecting a list of findings and then having to go back and document that we had that information, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for that. So, you know, from our perspective, you know, communication is really the key, you know, for this, and we really hope that, you know, we have a good process working with our lead monitor, and then we would ask, you know, at the beginning of every monitoring event that that the local area appoints someone as your kind of point person for the review, and that we're asking our team members to keep in regular contact with that point person. You know, as in, you know, previous reviews, our intent is, you know, we don't want to, you know, debate a finding, you know, back and forth, but we don't want to, you know, identify a finding where it isn't a finding, you know, based on, you know, information that, you know, either wasn't available or wasn't interpreted, you know, correctly. So bottom line is that, you know, we want to keep the lines of communication open. And so, you know, part of that will be, you know, working with the lead and hopefully your appointed lead person at the local level as well. There will be areas where, you know, at the end of the day, we'll say, you know, if we don't have this and it isn't there, you know, there will, you know, I can't promise that, you know, I can't promise there won't be, you know, 22, you know, non-findings letter, because that just won't happen.
I understand. It's just, like I said, when they're here, if they're looking through a file and it's like, wait, I can't see this, it's easy for staff to go in and say, well, here it is. So that's all I was getting at. So I agree. If it's not there, it's not there, and that's a finding. But I just was hoping that we could have that communication. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing is, as well, is, you know, we're also open. We understand that, you know, some of these files may be monsters as far as just the amount of documentation. And, you know, we're going to be reasonable as far as, you know, working with the lead to say, okay, well, let's figure out what's going to work, right? You know, it may be that, you know, I'm just thinking like of a monster trade file, right? And if you just have like pages and pages of an attendance verification. You know, maybe it's you know, maybe we're just, you know, okay, monitor will, you know, set up a, you know, call with the case manager, say, okay, well, just show me, you know, this time period and this time period, as opposed to like that full, you know, stack of 50 documents or whatever. So, you know, definitely give that feedback as we go. So, I mean, if it doesn't make sense to, I think, as Robin said, you know, 250 pages, you know, to scan and upload, you know, it may not make as much sense. We may have to see it, but again, let's work through the process and figure out what is reasonable. I think we're also open to other uses of technology, right? As long as the information is secure. Like if it makes sense to say, hey, I couldn't see X, Y, and Z, either, okay, we'll upload that in a second secure upload, or, you know, even if, hey, can we get on a secure, you know, WebEx call and, you know, point the, you know, put the documents, you know, up to the screen and let me see it. And, you know, we could do a screenshot or something, you know, so those are just some other ideas, and you may have others to suggest, and we're definitely open to those ideas. And, you know, obviously we're reviewing anything that comes out of, you know, U.S. Department of Labor, from other states, other best practices or promising practices around this. So if you have ideas, definitely let us know. Any other questions on just the kind of the process, nuts and bolts? All right, I'll move to the final section here today, and that is just going to be our areas of emphasis. And so hopefully you're all seeing the PowerPoint presentation again. And so the program year 2020 areas of emphasis will include those areas identified by our funder, U.S. Department of Labor, those common findings that were identified. We'll look at those same areas of concerns at the state level as well. I want to point out these last and make some comments on these last items. The first being the WIOA governance and the one-stop operator procurement. And this is really, going back to, that technical finding that I should note that, we are scheduled to talk with USDOL at the first week of October, and hopefully they will accept our corrective action. When I guess say when and hopefully when. I don't want to say if, because the documentation that the team, the interagency team, has put together is fairly significant, and we think it addresses the payment provision requirements. Those requirements, hopefully, when accepted by USDOL, will be integrated into the requirements for the governor's cost sharing guidelines, and that process kicks off, as most of you know, in the fall. So that would include, some updated templates, some required language around payment provisions within your one-stop operator agreements, and then also some technical documentation around, verifying that there is a value to the services provided, even if those services are provided as a leveraged resource utilizing other WIOA funds. But more to come on that in October and November as we get more information. We will be, just verifying that, one-stop operator procurement is, intact. One of the issues that DOL had noted that there were some other technical, outside of this consortium model for one-stop operators, there were some other technical procurement concerns. And so we will most likely have a procurement, one-stop operator procurement webinar / training, whether or not that's incorporated into the PY21 governor's guidelines or, as a standalone, that's to be determined. But again, that's part of our USDOL corrective action. Next item is the protection of personally identifiable information. I want to put a pin in that one because I've got a final slide on that. I want to talk about WIOA service delivery. Obviously, as we are in the extraordinary times of COVID, one of the things that we want to continue to work with you. Certainly Annie Dorr, Brian Ellis, and in our team in the sub working groups of the IWP, we know continue to work hard around just general guidance around providing services and ensuring that that centers are secure and the staff and participants are safe, and that services are being provided. So area of emphasis is going to be around just ensuring that we have up-to-date information, that how are your centers providing workforce services both in person and remotely. If you are providing them in person, that you have, that you've done your review of security, that things make sense, and security as it relates to protection on the COVID side, protection on the building and participant security side, and then also obviously that your center information is up to date in Illinois WorkNet and any other places, right? It's critical now more than ever to make sure that our workforce services are made available. I think on Monday on the weekly meeting, we just talked about how there was a little bit of a dip in the demand or the activity at the centers or those that have been contacting some local workforce areas. So just essential to make sure that our information that's out on the web and certainly on Illinois WorkNet is constantly updated and as needed. And if anyone needs assistance with that, we can definitely provide you through Annie and Brian with assistance in making sure that that information is updated. It's also important, I know from a technical standpoint, I think there was a reminder that was sent out just regarding the designation of those local workforce centers. We have received a number of requests from U.S. Department of Labor for lists of our centers, both comprehensive and satellites and other sites. And I am just concerned, and our team at DCEO is concerned about making certain that that is accurate, because it opens ourselves up to risk as it relates to the requirements around the MOUs and the cost sharing MOU budget process for sites that are incorrectly designated. So again, just to make sure that you've made those updates, that will also be double checked. And then obviously we talked about the WIOA non-formula grants, and so those grants will be working with our different program managers within Office of Employment and Training to coordinate what that monitoring review looks like. Again, depending on the point at which we're monitoring will determine how much activity is actually reviewed during this cycle. One last slide here, talking about personally identifiable information, and this is just a really important reminder, for us as administrators and as staff and monitors, in that the bad actors are lurking out there, unfortunately, we see an emphasis around unemployment insurance, obviously using fraud to collect UI, and that obviously that's a high target for crooks because of money involved. But it doesn't take long to to think of what's next, right? So once the UI fraud is locked down, next thing to come may be identity theft. So as we look to do more and more remotely, and we absolutely want to support that, just as an important reminder around protections of personally identifiable information, and make sure that you have policies and procedures in place for the protection of personally identifiable information. If there is an interest in rerunning a session just on personally identifiable information and the protection of that, we certainly would be open to rerunning that. I think Chuck Dooley did that about 2 or 3 years ago, and we can update that presentation if there is a request for that. And that is the end of kind of the formal information that we have provided. We will definitely provide this PowerPoint as well as kind of a summary of what our schedule looks like, for the local workforce areas. We'll also be connecting in some of the non-WIOA grants within that schedule as well. Okay, yes, thank you for that feedback as far as rerunning the session on the PII, or the Personally Identifiable Information Protection. Okay, so if we can open it up, if you want to unmute yourself, if you have any questions, or we got plenty of time in the chat to plenty of room and plenty of time in the chat, right? I will look up to see if there is a question about, is there a sample PII policy that we could send out? I will look that up and follow up. Okay, any final questions? All right, going twice. Any final questions?
John, is the
Okay,
PowerPoint going to be posted somewhere, or is it going to be emailed out to attendees?
Good question. Kirsten,
Yes, so we will upload this recording and have it accessible on our website, I believe, and then we will send out that link to the recording as well as attach the slides to a follow-up email to all of the attendees. So you will receive it via the follow-up email as well as have it accessible on the website as well, on our website.
Great, thank you.
great, thank you for that. Okay, it looks like there's a question about what is the definition of subcontractors and contractors? Oh boy, how to answer this directly? So, so obviously, there's contractors that are like vendors, right? And I can actually send there's some information from DOL that kind of does a better job than I will on this, but vendors are contractors that are vendors are they maybe it's a vendor that does cleaning service, right? They have nothing to do with like making eligibility determinations. So people who do eligibility determinations and are like core to the program elements, those are seen as like subrecipient contractors. You could call them contractors. So really, we don't make a big distinction between a contractor and a subcontractor. You as local workforce areas, each one of you, technically you're characterized as a subrecipient as it relates to the full award. The state is the recipient of the award from U.S. Department of Labor. You all are the subrecipients, but you have contracts. So I would probably say that it's just contracts, but those quote unquote contracts could be vendor contracts, or they could be what I would characterize as a second tier subrecipient contract. So sorry for the technical answer. Okay, well, one last call for questions, and certainly as we move forward, you can contact Annie, myself. Your team lead is your primary point of contact for the reviews. And then, obviously you all know how to get in touch with me. So one final call for questions. And thank you, Deb, for posting that. Chuck, so quick down and dirty on the PII. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up then. Thank you all again. Really appreciate your attendance and the great questions, and really appreciate your cooperation as we move forward with the process for the next year. And as I said, if you have any questions or concerns, please let us know moving forward. So with that, we'll wrap it up and wish you all a great day and have a happy start of the fall season. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.